TracerPlus.com. For those of you who are not familiar with our products and are new to our webinar series, TracerPlus is a rapid application development tool that allows you to quickly create mobile applications that can be used on Windows Mobile, CE, and Android devices, smartphones, and tablets. This allows you to create an application in a drag-and-drop type environment in a product called TracerPlus Desktop. Deploy that particular project out to your connected device, and then go ahead and collect data. And then we have a product called TracerPlus Connect, which allows you to actually tie that data to a back-end database of your choice. In this instance, we're going to demonstrate the use of a MySQL database. I also wanted to mention that all of our software is available for trial. So if you go to TracerPlus.com, click the Take a Trial button above, you can go ahead and download the desktop software as well as the Connect software, and you can do a fully functioning trial. Okay, so with that being said, my demonstration today is going to include, I'm going to create a quick work in process application in desktop just to show you how easy it is to create an application on the fly. Then I'm going to show you creating an actual database in MySQL, and then we're going to create a data source for that in Windows. And using our Connect software, we're going to marry those two together, and we're actually going to perform a sync of some data that we collect. Okay, so what you're looking at here is our TracerPlus Desktop software. This is our welcome screen. So you're presented with a few options: one to create a new project, open an existing project, or search our online samples. You'll notice that we do have a bevy of different applications available in different categories where you can actually download these right into desktop, use them as is, or make modifications to them. In this instance, I'm going to create a new project. We can go ahead and name the project. I'll just call it WIP for work in process. At this point, you can choose a platform you're creating for, whether it's a Windows Mobile CE device or an Android device. So once we go ahead and name that project, we can go ahead to our session here. This is the actual application that's going to collect the data. So I'm going to go ahead and also name this work in process. And then we can start creating our fields. So we'll have a barcode field. We'll have, I guess you could call it a stage. Basically, the current process that this item is at. We'll capture a date. And maybe even we'll capture the user who's actually doing the scanning. Since I don't need these additional fields, I'll just go ahead and remove them. And then next we can actually define what some of these fields do. So barcode, that's just going to accept a barcode or text input, so we can leave that as a type of text. The stage, this will be a drop-down that we can select from. So we can actually enter some values here. So we'll say assembly, final inspection, shipped, on-site, and installed. So those can be our processes that are available to choose from. Next, we'll go to our date field. So we'll just have an automatic date timestamp, so I'll just choose a data type of date time. Once we do that, you could actually choose a custom date and time format, based on what region you may be in. I'll just choose our common options here. And then lastly, we have the user field, which we would define as a variable. And then we can actually choose whether we're capturing a user that may have logged into the device, or maybe we just want to know what device scanned it. So in this case, I'll just capture the device ID. A few other things we can define here is the actual flow of the application. So once we scan a barcode, what do we want to do? So after that, we want to go to the stage field. So we have this go to field set to stage. And then when we select the stage, we're going to actually want this record to submit and return back to the barcode field. So I'm going to turn on the auto submit feature, and the go-to field I'm going to set it to barcode. We can also actually go back to the date and user fields and make these read-only so that the user can't make modifications to them. So once we finish defining our fields, I'm going to go over to our form designer and we can actually build our form. This is what it's going to look like on the device when it's deployed. So this is a nice drag and drop environment allowing you to customize the form. You can add colors, different fonts, boldness. You can add your logos to it, images, and so forth. So I'm just going to customize this a little bit. Maybe I'll align some of these controls here. Move some things around a little bit. Let me just reset that. Move this down and over. Make our tab bigger. Maybe we want to change the background color. So I'll come over here to our selected control properties and we can actually change colors. So maybe we'll make it a navy background. Then we can also change this here. We'll change this to that same navy background. And then we'll change the fore color, which is the text color. We'll change that to white. Maybe we'll make this a little bigger. So come over here to our font, make this a 20, and maybe we'll make that bold. Just align these again. Move our buttons around a little bit. Maybe change the color of those as well. Make those a lighter blue. Do a sky blue here. Make those bold. And there, we have a form created pretty rapidly. So now I'm going to show you my connected device here. I'm going to go ahead and deploy this out by just clicking our build deploy. And then we'll click deploy again. So that'll auto launch TracerPlus on our device. And if we go to this form, it should look exactly as we've designed it here. So maybe we want to make a little change here. That record count, I'll slide over a little bit. And then the stage field, depending on the device you're using, Dropdowns display a little differently in Windows. Some of the newer Windows mobile versions, so I'll just make that drop-down a little bigger. And see, I made those changes, and then we can just quickly deploy them right out to the device. And once again, if we take a look at our form, now we'll see that it looks a little better. And if we just drop down our drop-down list, there's our 5 steps that we can choose from. So next I'm going to jump over to our instance of MySQL here. So this is a local MySQL database running on some of our local servers here. So I'm going to just come over here and create a new schema. So we'll call this one MySQL _ webinar. So I'll just create that, finish. So here's our new schema. Now I'll just right-click that. Actually, let me expand that. Right-click our tables and create a table. So I'm going to create a table that matches that form that we just created. So we'll call this table width. And then we'll start adding some columns here. So maybe we'll have an ID. Then we'll have a barcode field. We'll have our stage field, our date, and our user. We can set various properties. This ID field, which is our key, we're going to want that to auto-increment, not null, primary key, all this other stuff. You could fill out if you wanted to. I'm just going to leave it as is for now, and I'm just going to apply that. Now if I expand our tables, we now have a WIP table. If I were to edit that, we'll see our database here. Currently we have no data in it. So now we're going to create a data source for this. So I'm going to go to, depending on the version of Windows you're running, your ODBC Administrator would be accessed differently. If you're running a 32-bit version of Windows, you would just access that from the control panel under the Administrator tools. If you're running a 64-bit version of Windows, you'll actually have to access this from the C, Windows, and then there's a syswow64 folder, and then you'll see an ODBC AD32. So that's the 32-bit ODBC Administrator. So that would be required to use that with the Connect product. So I'm going to create a new system DSN, clicking our Add button. It's going to be MySQL, so I'll choose our MySQL option. We'll choose our data source name. So we'll name this WIP. We'll enter our server address here. Oops, I accidentally hit the Enter key. So let me just open that up again. We'll go ahead and enter our user. And we should be able to see our databases in here. So we'll look for our MySQL webinar. There it is. We can do a test, connection successful. We'll hit OK. So now if we come back, we see our WIP and our list here. Now if I come over to our TracerPlus Connect software, our next step is actually marrying that data source to that TracerPlus application. So I'm going to create a new project. Now I'm going to add a new profile. So at this point, you can actually choose what type of profile it's going to be, whether it be a sync profile that would include cradled syncing or wireless batch syncing, where you're pressing a button on the device that would actually push that data back and forth. You could also set up timed syncs using this method as well, where a sync can actually run at a certain time or a certain interval. The other option we have here is a live profile that will allow you to actually operate in a real-time environment where data actually posted goes directly to the database over Wi-Fi or cellular. And I'll actually show you a pre-made application I already have a little bit later demonstrating that live mode posting to a MySQL database. So I'm going to leave this on sync profile. Another option we have is to actually marry this to a desktop project. So I'm going to marry this to our WIP desktop project. This allows you to easily map the fields from the TracerPlus side to the database side. If you didn't tie the TracerPlus desktop project to this, you would just get generic field names such as field 1, 2, 3, 4. It would make it a little tougher to actually map. So our first profile, we'll call this one sync from device. We'll go ahead and add a process. We'll call this sync WIP transactions. So our source, this is where the data is going to be coming from. So in this case, since we're syncing from the device, our source will be TracerPlus. Once we select TracerPlus, you'll see any available sessions that we would have created in that project. Since we only created that one, we have our WIP here. You also have the option to transfer session data or drop-down data. So if you actually wanted to send drop-down data from a MySQL table to a drop-down field in TracerPlus, you could do that by selecting this particular drop-down, and that would most likely be on the destination side instead of the source. So our destination, we're syncing to our MySQL database, so we're going to choose ODBC. We're going to choose our WIP DSN. Once we do that, we'll see the tables that were available or what we created in that particular schema. So we have our WIP table. Then what we're going to want to do is just marry up our mappings down here below. So this is saying barcode is going to go to barcode, stage to stage, date to date, user to user. Okay. You'll also have other options here for each the source and destination. So in this case, we have a post type. So basically, when you sync this data to that MySQL database, what do you want to do with that table or to that table? Do you want to keep appending? Do you want to overwrite what's in there? Maybe you want to update based on a barcode field. Maybe you want to update and append if it's not found. And we also had a new option of delete existing, which is it's used in rare cases, but it was actually added for one of our end users. In this case, we're just collecting transactions, so I'm just going to leave it on append. If we look at our options on the source side, we can actually do filtering. This would allow you to actually filter data that gets transferred from the source to the destination. This can be a static filter, or it can actually even be dynamic, driven from the device. Lastly, we have some advanced options for both the source and destination. On the TracerPlus side, you can control how many records per message are sent. Depending on the type of data you're syncing, increasing this number can actually speed up your sync. If you're actually syncing image data, you may want to, play around with this just to see how you can improve that sync speed. I'll leave it at 10 since we're not going to be doing too many transactions. And then on the database side, we have a binary file path, which is basically if you have images and SIGs, you could sync that data to a separate folder and reference it by name, or in the case of MySQL, you can actually embed that data directly to a field. So this setting wouldn't really be necessary for that. So I'm going to go ahead and save this project. Just call it WIP. And we also have a Synchronize page here. So one of the things you could do is cradle a device, and then you can hit the sync buttons within the Connect Management Studio. And then we also have a data viewer. This will give you a little view of the database itself, so you wouldn't have to open the database. So as transactions are synced, we'll be able to refresh and actually see those. Okay. So now we have our Connect configured and mapped to our MySQL database. So now the last thing I want to do is configure Connect-specific settings within Desktop. As it is now, I could cradle a device and hit this sync button here, and that would work. I'm actually going to show you how to do a sync via button action on the form. So the first thing we need to do is go back to our Project tab, go to our Connect settings, and add a host. So this will be the IP address or PC name of the PC or server that has the Connect software running on. In this case, it's my local PC, so we're going to set it to that. And by default, we're using a port of 4403. So now this will allow me to make that connection from device to the Connect server. Next thing I want to do is add a sync button to our form. So I'll come over to our form designer, click the button option, and then place it on the form. We can make this a little bigger, and we can rename it. We'll call it Sync. We'll go ahead and change our font. And we'll set a button action for it. In this case, it's a button action of do sync. And then we have the option to choose the host and the profile ID that we're going to be syncing to or from. So the host, that's what we just set up here. If you happen to have multiple hosts that you're syncing to, you'll notice that each one would have an ID. So in this case, it's host ID 1. So that's what our host ID is going to be set to here. So now our profile ID is going to define which profile and Connect that we're going to sync. So if we come back over to Connect and the configure screen, you'll notice that each profile has a unique ID. Since this was our first profile, this is ID 1. If I were to create another profile, it would be an ID of 2. This allows you to basically split up processes into different profiles, allowing you to sync those at different times. So for instance, we did have a drop-down field in here. If I wanted to actually sync that data from a MySQL database, I could do that as well. And I probably don't want to do that at the same time that I sync the transactions from the device. So I could actually create a second profile here, a second sync profile, choose our desktop project, set it as a source of ODBC and our MySQL database with a destination of TracerPlus, and we would set our table to stage dropdown instead of session data. So that would have a completely separate profile that we could actually control from a different sync button. So this is our profile ID 1, so we're going to set that, and we'll just go ahead and deploy this out. And if I bring up my mobile device, we should now have our sync button, and we do. So I'll just bring Connect to our background here, and we'll just start entering some transactions. So I'll just go ahead and see if I can scan some barcodes here for you. And then we'll select our stage. So we'll say this is an assembly. So you notice that once I selected assembly, that record auto-submitted and returned us to the barcode field. Now if I were to scan that again, maybe it's at the next stage, final inspection, it'll submit. And I'll just basically do 5 scans for each of the stages. On site, and then finally we'll do our installed. Maybe we'll scan another barcode here. We'll say that this one is at assembly. So now that we're done, if we just jump over to the data viewer, we have no data here. We jump over to MySQL, just do a refresh. We don't have any data here. So now we're going to go ahead and do this sync. So you'll see some activity happening in the background. So that just synced our 6 records over pretty quickly. So now if we were to go ahead and look at our MySQL database and do a refresh, there's our data that we just collected. We have our barcode, our stage, our date, and the user that actually did that scan. You would see the same view if we went over to Data Viewer and did a refresh. We're just viewing that same data. Once again, that allows you to actually quickly view the data without having to go into the database itself. One thing I just noticed, you'll see that the records still exist on the device. In this particular case, we would probably want to delete them. So if we jump back over to Configure and Options, one of the options for the source was a delete after transfer. That's just a warning telling you that this feature won't work if you're not registered. So this would allow you to remove the data from the device on a particular sync. So I'll just remove it manually by doing a delete all. And then if we were to do a few more transactions, let's say this is the final inspection. This one's at assembly. And this one will say that shipped. Then if we do another sync, we should see these transactions actually get removed from the device. You'll see that that record count went to 0. If we do a refresh, there's our 3 additional transactions as they just appended to the table. I'll just jump over and show you a few other features here in regards to syncing. So we have our live sessions. I'll go ahead and show you that in a moment when we actually do a demonstration on that. We have our sync timers. You can actually add a timer to this. You can set an interval. You select which host the timer is going to run for. And then once again, as you could in the Do Sync button, you can also set what profile that time sync should run. So this would have a sync run every 60 seconds in the back, or actually, you would see a sync dialog pop up when this does a sync. You could actually hide this by unchecking the sync feedback option here for display sync progress. You can also control when this sync takes place by defining sync conditions. So you could set a date-time condition for before, let's say 12 a.m., or actually I should say after 12 a.m. And then we'll set another date-time condition for, let's say, before 12:01 a.m. And then maybe we would change this to 45. So this would basically say, or allow the sync to run only between 12 and 12:01 a.m. So that's how you could set up sync timers and also tie in sync conditions with those particular timers. You could also do the sync timers without the conditions and maybe just set that interval, at a little greater time period. All right, so that's what I wanted to show you as far as creating something from scratch and how quickly you can get it, from start to finish, syncing to MySQL. So I'm going to open an existing project I have here. I'm just going to go over to a web page. We actually have this live on site. You can even put this this URL in your browser to actually see it happen on your side as well. But it's a simple vehicle transportation app we had developed for a customer where they're basically picking up vehicles from a location, collecting customer information, vehicle information, as well as taking signatures and photos of the vehicle. So we actually took a MySQL database, this particular table here, name, address, city, state, zip, year, make, model, VIN, and then we have 2 signatures and 3 photos of the vehicle as well as the date, time. So we took this MySQL database and created a PHP page to actually pull information from this database and display it in a web page. So you can actually access this information from a browser over the web anywhere that you are. PHP is something that's commonly used hand-in-hand with MySQL, so it does play well together. So if I were to jump over to details of an inspection, this is a previous inspection that I took. So you have your customer info, you have your signatures, you have your automobile info, and you have 3 pictures here. So I'm just going to go back. We'll go back to desktop. This is the actual desktop project. Here's the form. So in this particular case, I'm going to operate this in live mode. So if we do jump over to Connect and we look at our live sessions, you'll see that I had added a live session here. You basically enable it. You pick the session that you want to make live. You pick the host that you want to make live. Once again, is that host ID from here. And you pick your profile ID from Connect that you want to make live. So I'm going to go ahead and open a different project here. Should be our MySQL webinar project. So this is one I've defined for live mode. So you'll see that the interface is going to look a little bit different. So a live profile, you're not going to have a source and destination. You're just going to have a live data source because it's always going to be working with TracerPlus. So you only have to choose a type that TracerPlus is going to talk with. In this case, ODBC, our MySQL webinar was the name of my data source. And the table I'm referencing is the photo demo. Once again, we marry up all of our field names in the mappings area, and we just set our key field. Then we could jump over to the data viewer, and we could actually see the actual information from that particular record. You can even see the signatures and images in there. So that's how you would set up a live sync profile, as we call it. And that's how it's defined here. So that profile is ID 1, so we call out profile ID 1. If you were using a mix of sync and live profiles, you would just specify whichever profile ID was the live profile here. So I'm just going to push this out to my device. And if we bring up Connect and we open this form, so now this is going to make a live connection. You'll see some activity happening in the background. It's doing a records refresh here. And then once we're actually connected, you'll see that that icon in the lower right changed from a yellow caution to that blue connected icon. So we're doing the same thing here. We're entering a name. We'll enter myself. We'll enter an address. So we're, say we're picking up a vehicle from this location and we're transporting it somewhere. So we're just going to select our state. Enter our zip. And we'll click our vehicle info, where we can select our make and model. Say it's a 2011. Say it's an Audi A4. And we're actually, this is another feature we're using here, is filtered dropdowns. So based on the make chosen, it would filter down this model list to only models available for that particular make. Let's say, you'll see here's your BMW models, but if we switch back to Audi, we have our Audi models. Say it's an A6, you could scan a VIN. I'm just going to type in some random numbers. Then the actual person you're picking up the car from, you can take their signature. If I can sign this on the device so it looks a little better. And the driver can also confirm what he's picking up by taking his signature. I'll just do some scribble here. And then we can take these 3 photos here. I don't have a car in front of me actually, so I'm just going to take a picture of my desk again. So we could take a picture of the rear passenger. And once we get done taking a photo, it will be returned to the preview screen where you could either accept the photo or take it again. Take our front driver. And then we'll take our interior. Okay, so I'll bring my web page up again. So if we keep an eye on this, this is set to auto refresh. So now when I go to submit this record, I'm going to click the Submit button. Since we have 2 SIGs and 3 images, it will take a couple seconds for the submit to take place, but you'll see I submitted that record and it's already showing up on our web page here. So here's me, Joe Kraebel. We click on this link. Now we can see further details on this particular transaction. We have our client name, that's myself. We have our 2 signatures, our vehicle, and then the 3 photos that we took. So picture doing this with an Android phone out in the fields. You know, a rather cheap solution to get implemented. Driver carries a phone, picks up vehicles, enters all this information, hits submit. It posts right away to a back-end database, a MySQL database, back in the main office, and then any user with an internet connection can actually view this particular website, view this data. So it's a nice, easy, and intuitive way to share data with everyone. So that is pretty much what I wanted to show you today. I hope you got a lot out of this. We do have a question on syncing data to the device as a drop-down, just confirming that. Yes, we can take the data. So actually, if I wanted to, if I switch back over to our local server here, and I were to go to our MySQL webinar, let's create a new table. We'll call it stages. Oops, we'll spell it right. So we'll have our ID column, and then we'll have the stage. And then we'll just apply that. So now if I were to come over here and edit the table data, we could actually add our different stages in there of assembly, final inspection, shipped, on site. We will add another option here just to show you that it updates, called on-site inspection, and then installs. All right, there we go. So now if I were to actually map that, well, first let me open our other project here again, our WIP project. So we'll want to add another button to sync the drop-down. So we could actually do something like this. We could slide this over, put this button up here, and then call it update. Set up a do sync button. Our host once we're going to, again, will be 1. Our profile, I'm going to add a new profile to that, so that'll be ID 2. So I'm going to set that to 2. And we'll just push this out. And then we'll just jump back over to Connect. We'll go ahead and open our other project. We'll go ahead and add a second profile. Once again, it'll be a sync profile. I'll just show you what happens if you don't add the desktop project. You'll just see your generic list of 32 sessions. So let me do that this time. Add our sync profile. Choose our project. So we'll call this Sync 2 device. Add our process. We'll call this one Sync Stage Dropdown. This is going to come from ODBC. We'll choose our WIP ODBC data source. Now we have two different tables in here, so we'll choose our stages. We're going to TracerPlus, so instead of session data, we'll choose our stage dropdown. And then stage will be our display value, and then maybe we want to overwrite. So go ahead and save that. Jump back over. So if we look at our stage, we have our 5 options. We'll hit our update. That should sync our 6 options. So there's our 6 options now. We added that on-site inspected. So you can sync drop-down data from MySQL to TracerPlus. Someone's actually asking about running Connect as a service. You can actually do that, so you don't have to have Connect open. You would just simply go to Tools Preferences, and you would choose, you'll see Management Studio options, and you also have Connect Service, Sync Service options. So this is the actual service, so you would choose what project you want Connect to run as the service. So I could select our WIP project. So when we run the sync, when we go over the service, it's going to look at this particular project. You'll notice that the sync service port is 4404. So I'm going to jump back over to Connect, and if we look at our host under the desktop, I should say, if we look at our host under the Connect settings, you'll see a port of 4403. So if you wanted to run into the sync service, you would just change that to 4404. You could push that out. And then the only thing you would need to do is make sure that you, if the service was running already, you would need to stop it and restart it just for those changes to take effect. So if I actually close Connect, so Connect's no longer running. If I look at my sync service down here, we have a tray icon. You'll see that it is stopped. So then if I hit Start, that little red X is going to go away. I'm not actually sure if you can see my taskbar. But you could also start and stop the sync service from the Windows Services area, or even through the Start menu shortcut, PTS, TracerPlus Connect 8, and then you have the options to stop and start the service. So if I jump back over to the device and I try to do a sync, you'll see that it still makes that connection. Sync is successful. Even though the Connect is not running, it's making that connection through the service. So we'll still have our drop-down data here. All right, that looks like all the questions for today. So I want to thank everyone for joining us. I hope you got a lot out of this. Once again, it will be recorded. So enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.